This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
All right, I welcome you all into this Dell Boomi session. In the last session, we started working on a Boomi process, right? What was that Boomi process doing? Reading the data. It was reading the data from file. What kind of file was that? XML file, a JSON file, a flat file?
XML.
It was an XML file, right? So we started reading an XML file. What kind of data was it holding?
Employee data.
Okay, it had an employee data, right? And the how it looked like is something, maybe I have to get it.
It has employee ID, last
Okay,
name.
this is how it looked like, right? It had employee ID, the first name, the last name, right? And we were trying to read this file. And which connector do we use to try to read this kind of file?
Connector.
This connector, right? We used a disconnector. We understood why we added a try catch shape. We also understood why we are starting a process with a start shape of no data type, right? So and we try to understand what is the difference between a start shape of no data type and a start shape of connector type, right? So if we start with a start shape of no data type, what is the unique quality of start shape of no data type? It produces an empty document, right? It produces an empty document, and that empty document makes sure that subsequent shape gets triggered, right? And I hope you understand by now that if we do not have a document acting on a specific shape, that shape will not get executed, right? And document is nothing but encapsulation of the data, right, which has to process. So now this was only subset of what we wanted to achieve. Eventually what we want is this whole data which we were able to read should land into the database, or should be able to insert it into the database. Now for that to happen, you must have some database installed, right? So you might have worked on different databases, I'm not sure, but in our sessions we'll try to look into the Oracle database. We'll try and look into the MySQL database, and if we'll see if it is possible to cover SQL Server also. Okay, but more or less these work in the same fashion. Come again?
I said good morning, Sumit. Sorry for joining
Good
late.
morning, Manju. Good morning. Good morning. We just started. Okay. So these are the different databases, or there are many others. Okay. So we will try to start with the Oracle database. Okay. The one which I'm using right now is Oracle XE11G database. You can get the installable from the internet. If you don't find it, I can also share the installable with all of you. Yeah. I'll give you the installable. One thing you have to understand while you do any kind of installation, right, throughout this training. So when you install, sometimes what happens is they ask you something like port number, right? The installer will ask you username or something like password, some anything of that sort, right? You have to keep all these details handy. What I've typically observed with majority of the people who join training, I will ask them to do install something, they will install it, but they will not make a note of all these things, and later on we keep on struggling, right? What is the port number? Then we'll find some workaround to retrieve that port number, username and password. So it's better you make a note of all those things while doing the installation itself. Create a notepad or sticky notes, whatever you feel like. Have all those things handy, because this information would be crucial for us at a later stage where we need to establish the connectivity from the Boomi, right? So the idea is whatever data we read from the file, we eventually want to insert this data into the database, right? And the prerequisite is you must have the database installed, right? So I have already installed a database, and that database is Oracle XE11G. So the database is like a server, right? And you need some client to interact with. So there are different clients for different databases, right? So I will use a simple client, a command line based client called a SQL plus. Okay, so how does that work is I press Windows R, right? And here I will just type SQL plus. So when I type SQL plus, this is the client which has a capability to basically interact with the database. So the database has already been installed, and with the database installation itself, you get the client using which you can interact with the database, right? So now it is asking me the username and password, right? So this username password I could configure while doing the installation, and I'm planning to use same over here. So what I'll do is I'll write the credentials, username, password. Okay, so when I do so, you might okay. So when I do so, I might see a message selected database, blah blah blah. You can see the version and all that stuff, blah blah. Okay,
Yes,
version
Sumit.
and all stuff.
Sorry for
So
interrupt. Your
SQL
voice
plus
is breaking.
client.
Sumit,
Okay.
your voice
Sumit,
is
your
breaking.
voice is breaking.
Yeah, 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 I understand. Yeah, I can understand. I got a notification that there's some problem with my voice. How's it now?
Same.
Guys, is it better by any chance?
It's the same, no.
Okay, is it better by any chance?
No, Sumit.
See one
Yes,
more
Sumit.
was
It's up. All right. Hey guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Let me get back to the stuff. Can you see my screen? I think you
Yes.
should be able to see it now. Okay. Thanks for bringing it up. Okay, and sorry about this disturbance. Okay, if you still see any kind of issues with my audio, please do let me know, and then we'll see. All right. So what I was saying is we have got a client, right? That client is capable of interacting with a database, right? And it asks me the username and the password, and where do I get that username password while doing the installation, and I'm able to connect with the database. Now this database which we are working with, right, Oracle database, is a relational database. Okay, you might have heard of RDBMS. I'm not sure how many of you have heard RDBMS. This is a relational database management system, right? And in this RDBMS types of databases, we store information in the form of tables, right? So there will be a lot of tables where we'll store different records. So right now what I want to do is I want to create a tables. So first of all, I want to see whether there is any table with the name employees. Okay, so it says there is no table with the name employees. So I want to create one. Create table, table name, right? Create table, table name, and after that you have to give what all information you want to store. So let's say I want to store employee ID, which is a number, or if you are not sure whether it will be number or not, you can take varchar also, right? But okay, let's take varchar, because if it is varchar, you can anyhow store even number also. Maybe you have a column for employee name, right? What else? So employee name will be a string, right? And the data type we have to represent string over here is varchar. Okay, I'm saying maximum we will have around 100 characters in the name. So we have got employee ID, we have got employee name, and what we decided is
Location and
notice,
notice period.
yes, the location and the notice period, and the notice period is going to change based on what? Based on the
Based
location
on
of the
location.
employer. Yeah. So let's have one column for location, and I will keep it as NP. NP stands for notice period. Okay, so it is throwing some issue. Maybe some parentheses are missing. Let's quickly review it. This is fine over here. Missing right parenthesis, what it is saying. Okay,
There
I'm
are two
not.
A's there.
Yeah, still there is an issue. Even maybe some spelling went wrong. Let's quickly review it. Create table, table name, employee ID. This is fine. Employee name, where 200. Name is, it is saying name is already used by existing object. Okay, that is the error. Not sure just now. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's keep it simple. Let's rename it. That's fine. Okay, and the table got created. I just named it APR. APR stands for April underscore employees, right? And I'm trying to I'll plan to use this table, right? So if I go here into this table, so I see there are no records as of now, but the table is created. If you want to see the description about the table, right? Not only this table, any table for that matter, this is how you can see it, where you can see what are the columns, what are the data types. You can see whether any kind of constraints are there or not, right? What do you mean by constraint? Constraint would mean, for example, employee ID is mandatory, right? Employee name can have these kind of characters only. So I do not have anything of that sort. We just have four columns as of now, and in these four columns we can insert the data. That's all, right? So any questions so far from this? Okay, I have just copy pasted this SQL query so that you don't need to struggle. Some of you might be really new to it. I understand it takes time. It's not, you may not be able to pick so fast. It might take you some time to go through the video multiple times. So it's better if I could paste this so that your life becomes a little easier when you start practicing. Any questions, guys, from anyone before we move ahead? All right, so we have a table in place and we want to go ahead and use this table in our Boomi process, right? So we'll go back to the Boomi process. Now you have to tell me we have a connectivity established to read the file. Do we need to establish any other connectivity now?
Yes.
Yes. And which
To connect
connectivity will that be?
database.
So I see database, you see there are different connectors. Database V2 and in brackets you see tech preview. The tech preview means that this is again still a beta version. Okay. And this is kind of not, this is not recommended to be used in your production environments. Anything where you see tech preview, right? That means it is not recommended to be used in the production environment because Boomi might make slight changes in this. So this is kind of a beta version, and based on the feedback and based on the observations, they will finalize this, right? We'll stick to this database connector, right? I'll hit OK. So we can drag and drop like this. Whenever you will see some configurations are missing, right? It will show you a warning kind of symbol. That means, okay, you dragged and dropped this component, which is fine, right? But there are certain configurations which are missing over here. So we'll double click on this and we'll try to review the configurations over here. So first of all, connector is database, which is fine. There is an action which is get or send. So what do you think? What should be the action in our case right now for the use case which we are working on?
Send.
Whether it should
Send.
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 Very nice. It should be send. Again, a lot of people keep it get and they try to configure insert operation. Boomi might not throw an error, but you may not see the data going inside. So quick note, you have to always look into this action, and this is a certification question also. where they will ask you whenever we go to the connector, what are all the options we have. So you have a connector option. So connect, this is a shape, right? Can you see this is a shape? Yes. In this shape, you have a display name. So let's say I say Oracle DB. Okay. Then it is asking you which type of connector, right? So we can select many connectors over here. I'm selecting the database, then the action, and then the connection and the operation, right? So I'll click on the connection now, and I'll say Oracle DB, right? So when I say Oracle DB and all, we'll start doing the configurations over here. It is asking me the driver type, right? So we have, why we need a driver? Driver acts as a bridge, right, between two different technologies and helps in establishing the connectivity. So those people who are from Java background, they might have heard of JDBC, right? And there we have different drivers. So even these different databases, they will publish, right? They will publish their drivers, right? And what do these drivers do is these drivers are implemented by different companies, different third parties, to make sure that the connectivity can be established by the third party applications, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so what's going to happen is a connectivity needs to be established, right? And for that connectivity to establish, a driver has to be used. So here we will select Oracle. So some of the drivers are by default there with the installation. Okay, some of the drivers, I'll repeat again, some of the drivers are by default coming with the installation, but for some of the databases you may not have the drivers on its own, so you might need to add manually, and we will see how to do that, right? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll write the username and all that stuff. So what is a username for me? That is system. Okay, please make sure you write your details which you get, which you configure, right? These may or may not be the exactly same ones. So my host is localhost. Why localhost? Because the machine where my atom is installed and the database is installed are the same machines. If let's say these are two different machines, then I have to give the host of the machine where your database is installed. Port by default, your port is 1521. But again, if you're configuring a different port while doing the installation, please write that. The database name typically is nothing but a service name, which is XE. XE stands for Express Edition. Save. Now this is a technology connector, right? So why it is a technology connector? Because database, file system, these all falls under technology connectors, and I am trying to connect with the database as a technology, and here I have an option test connection. So when I do a test connection, I get two options. One is Boomi Cloud, right? Means this is related to Boomi, and this is my atom. So I will use my atom for now, and I will test the connection. If everything is fine, if all the details which I've added would be fine, then the connection should be successful. Okay, so we get a green color tick mark which says the test connection successful, which means these all details look relevant and these are good enough to establish the connectivity with the database, right? So I'll just hit on OK for now. You see some warning over here. Why do we see that warning?
Operation
It's
is
not
not
connected to any.
configured.
Yes, we have not configured the operation yet. Yes, only the connection has been configured. Another thing is, same thing we did over here. If you want to go to the connection, one way is double click. You can click on pencil button and you can go to the connection. Also, you can see there are some hyperlinks over here. So this first hyperlink is for connection and the second hyperlink is for operation, right? So now here the second hyperlink is missing. Why? Because we have not configured the operation. But before we get into the operation, there is an important step which needs to be taken care of. Can anybody tell me what is that important step?
Conversion of data.
Even before that,
This is not connected to anything.
okay, that important step is that the connection which we configured must be moved to the common folder, isn't it? So we are working on this folder. There is a connector, there is a database. Do you remember yesterday we decided that we will make sure all the connections are residing in the common folder? Yes or
Yeah.
no? Right
Yes.
now this connection is not residing in the common folder, right? So now if you do this kind of development, what might happen is tomorrow if somebody else also need to establish a connectivity with this database, and if they do not find that database connector in the common folder, then they may create a new connection, which is not the right approach, which may create a licensing problem later on. So what I'll do is I'll drag like this, and where do I have to move it? This one,
Connectors.
connections. Okay, I'll just drag and drop, so it gets refreshed. So now let me minimize everything. You see, we go to the connections. In connections, we have two connectors, database, right? We have disk. Okay, that's all. So now this is done. Second thing is we'll start talking about the operation. So let me write Oracle DB insert employees data. Yeah, Oracle DB insert employees data. Now what do I do over here? I'll create a profile. Now it becomes important to understand another important component, very important component in Boomi, that is profile. Okay, the Boomi convention is profile. In other tools, you call it as either schema. Schema is a more commonly used word in the integration world, but Boomi has its own conventions, right? So schema, what is the literal meaning of schema? Have I think you must have heard, some of you must have heard about this schema word, right?
Schema is nothing but user in
Actually,
database language.
okay, so if I see the literal meaning, right, of schema, okay, if I go here and just type schema meaning, I don't know why this my Google gets stuck and it takes so much of time. Okay, schema meaning will be structure. Okay, it will be some structure, or it is a representation of a plan or theory in the form of an outline or a model. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is this is going to help you. Schema is going to help you, as its literal meaning says, a representation of a plan or theory in the form of an outline or model. What do we mean by model? Some of you might have heard of something called as data modeling. Data model means nothing but structure. You want to define the data structure because you are getting some data from source. You want to push some data into target, which is fine, but at the same time, uh, give me a moment. I think I got rid of my platform. Okay. Meanwhile, it is coming up. What I'm trying to say is, yesterday we started looking at some data which was more or less like this, right? Or which was exactly like this. Now, when you're working on Boomi as an integration guy, you cannot start reading randomly any file you feel like, right? And even if you do that, you will not be able to manipulate that. You will be only able to manipulate that file on the fly or at the runtime only when you know the structure of the file. If you do not know the structure of the file, you can move file from one place to another. That is always possible, but you may not be able to manipulate the file. You may not be able to pull the data from the file. You may not be able to put some validations on the fields or the data which is coming in the file, because if you want to do that, you need to know the structure of the file. You need to know which elements will be always there. You need to know which elements will fall under which other elements. Until you know the structure, you cannot go and manipulate the data. You cannot go and pull the data. What I'm trying to say is, if you know that you will always get employee as the root element, and within that there will be always an employee ID element, then you can basically design some logic to see, okay, if the employee ID will not be present in the file, I will discard that file. But if you do not have an idea on the structure of the file, how can you do that? You cannot write any kind of validation logic, you cannot write any kind of transformation logic, you cannot write any kind of routing logic. So all these things can only happen when you know the structure of the file. And in Boomi world, profile is the mechanism to define the structure of the file. Profile is a component which helps to define the structure or metadata about the data. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it. You will hear this terminology very frequently, metadata. Metadata is nothing but additional information about the data. Okay, so now when you're working on the database, right? So for example, this information, whatever you see right after executing the description command, okay, that is nothing but the metadata, right, about the column. So employee ID is a column, but what is the metadata about employee ID? It's data type, because that is helping you further to understand that what kind of data it can hold. If it might have had any kind of constraint, then that is also metadata. Similarly, when we are trying to achieve the integrations, when we are trying to read the data, when we are trying to insert the data, one thing which becomes very significant for us is to understand that what is going to be the structure of the data, what is the represent, how can I represent that data. So the representation of the data has to happen with the help of schema, or it is essentially called as profile in Dell Boomi world, because data is going to get generated at the runtime, right? But all the manipulation logic which you have to do, you have to do while doing the development. So how is it possible to do that? How is it possible to design all your logic with no data being in place? Because data is going to get generated when you're executing your stuff, right? The only way it can happen is you use some mechanism to define the structure of the data. And the mechanism in the Boomi world is profile. We have different types of profile to represent different format of data, to define the structure of we have got XML profile, we have got JSON profile, we have got flat file profile, we have got database profile, and we have got EDI profile, right? So these are the 5 different type of profiles we have as of today, where if you want to represent the data which is in XML format, you have to go for XML profile. If you have to represent the data which is in flat file format, then go for flat file profile. If you have the database representation, then you go for database profile, and similarly EDI profile. So profile is going to help you to represent the data, right, or represent the structure of the data, because data is something which is going to get generated at the time of the execution. So now if I have to define any logic, I will take the help of the metadata about the data, that is nothing but the profile, which helps me to represent the structure of the data, right? So now when I go to this database connector, I go to the operation, I will write Oracle, I think I didn't save it last time, DB insert employees data, something like this. Okay, I save it. Now here if you see, there is a connector action which is sent, that's what we selected. Then there is a profile, then there are some commit options. In commit option, we have commit by profile, we have commit by number of rows, we have a batch count, and there is something called as JDBC batching. What does it do? Set the behavior for whether the batches of SQL statements are executed. So this is more related to define the behavior of your some insert or update operation, that at whether when you want to do a commit, whether you want to commit the data for whole data at a time, or you want to do it by number of rows, right? When you want to send the data to the database, you want to do it in some kind of batches and all. But those all are a kind of advanced option. We'll look at it. But first, I want to achieve the basic functionality wherein I should be able to push some sort of data. So if you click on plus over here, you get an option to create a database profile. Why database profile? Because why database profile? Because database will understand the data in its own format, right? And the profile which we use to represent the data which is understood by the database is the database profile, right? So the profile which we use to represent the data which is understood by the database is a database profile. Yes. So now what we do over here is, right, I will write db pipe symbol and maybe employees. Okay, or you can write employees data. That's all. Save. Now here there is something called a statement. Here there is something called as fields. There is something called as options. We have execution type. We are reading or writing. Okay, right now we are writing the data, so that's fine. Okay, so here is a statement. The moment I click on statement, do you see some option? Standard insert, update, delete, dynamic insert, stored procedure, dynamic update. So standard insert, update,
Smith,
delete.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you. Please tell me. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, Sumit.
Sumit.
All right. I think someone was speaking. I'm not sure it was. Okay, we'll move on. So what I was saying is we have something like standard insert, update, delete. Standard insert, update, delete would mean where you have to write your own query. Insert into everything you need to take care of your own. There is another thing called as dynamic insert. Dynamic insert means where the query will get generated on its own, right? And on the fly. So in standard insert, what will happen is you will need to define the column names for which you want to insert the data. Then you will need to define the values, or for what, from where we will get the values, right? I'm sure you must have seen some statements like this, or else let me show you here. Insert into APR underscore employees, right? So there are two ways. One is we write the column name, let's say employee ID, we'll write values, and let's say I write 101. Yes. So one row created. This is how we write the query. Now, right now, out of the 4 columns, I wanted to insert the data only into the one column, and that's how I write it, right? If I want to insert the data in all the columns, then I don't need the column names. I can write like this also: 101, comma, let's say employee name is Sumit. Yeah, what else? We have location. Location is, let's say, India. Notice period, let's say 100 days, and all that stuff. One row created. Now I'll commit all the stuff. I'll run a select query, select star from APR underscore employees. Okay, so things might not be so clear, but you can see here for the first row, only employee ID. So these are the column names, and this is employee ID, employee name, location, and notice period are empty. For the second one, we have employee ID and all that stuff. But if you see, it is not restricting us to have the same employee IDs, right? Isn't it? For the first record 101, second record 101. Why is it happening so? Because when we define the table,
There is no primary key.
yeah, there's
No
no primary
unique
key. We haven't, yes, we
and
haven't
unique.
added any kind of constraint, right? Okay, so I think you understand that. So what I'll do is quickly I'll delete all the data from this table for now, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to tell you is that standard insert would mean where you have to basically define the column names, the values. You have to take care whether you have to pass some null values or not. But in dynamic insert, the query itself gets generated on the fly based on the data which will be passed onto the query, right? So it will automatically make sure that all other values are nullified. So we will go for dynamic insert, and here I will name APR underscore employees for now. Yeah, this is my table name, isn't it? If you go back here, APR underscore employees is my table name. I will, here there is a button called as import. Now please understand that these might look too many of navigations for you, right? So I'll just save and close, save and close. I will repeat the navigations because sometimes it's a little tough. So we started with the operation. In the operation, we started with this profile. In the profile, we select statement and we select dynamic insert. We gave the name of the table, and now we will do next thing where we will say import. So import, it is asking me the first option, atom. I will restrict myself to the atom which I have installed. Then it is asking me to use the connection. So where is my connection residing? Over here, right? And what is the schema? I'm not sure, but let's give it a try. You connect to the atom, and atom is going to connect to the database, and it will load all the tables which are residing in that schema in that database. So you can see atom is loading database tables. Yes, when it is loading, can we find somewhere? I think we don't find it. I don't know. Let us quickly look into this. Can we find somewhere APR underscore employees? Yes. Can you see the second line item over here, which is APR underscore employees? This is the table we have been talking about. Yes or no? So what is happening is now you are trying to create a database. You have not created the database profile yet. What you are doing is we are trying to load the information from that table which is residing in the database, and Boomi is smart enough to read the metadata about the table and create the profile for you automatically. You do not need to create it manually. You just select the table, you hit next. Now it will retrieve all the information about the table, that what are the columns it has, what are the constraints it has, and accordingly it will show you certain options.
But we have deleted that column, right? The employee.
We have not deleted the column, we have deleted the rows. Yes, so the table is still intact. I did not delete. So there is nothing like deleting a table, there is like dropping a table. Okay, so if you guys, there is a lot of background noise coming in from someone. I don't know if someone is flying. All right. I don't know who all keeps on joining my session. I have no idea what is happening. Anyhow, so we have select. So you see the table. Okay, this is not the table. I'm so sorry. The table we are working on is APR underscore employees. So the table remains intact. Table hasn't been deleted. Only the records were deleted, right? So that is why you see all the columns. What I'm trying to tell you is we are trying to create a database profile. Okay, and while creating the database profile, what we are doing is we are trying to look up, go and select that table, then select all the columns, and it should automatically generate the fields and all. Yeah. All right. So you can hit save and close. So your profile automatically has got generated. Your operation is configured. I know some of you might be confused. Let's revisit. This is the profile which we were trying to create. When we go to the profile, there was a statement, dynamic insert. We were giving the table name. That's fine. We went to import. In the import, we selected the atom, which is very important. We selected the connection. The connection was created some time back. We use the same connection. Then you can give schema to narrow down your search. I gave schema, then it started loading the tables. I selected my table, then it showed me the columns. I selected all the columns. Okay, and once all the columns were selected, I hit save. It automatically generates the profile based on the structure we have defined in the database. I'll not create once again. I'll just hit cancel. And here, now you can see all these columns got created. Employee ID was there, position number 1. Now you have a option. Do you want to keep a mandatory check? Do you want to keep some enforce unique check? Right? Sometimes it will automatically get checked because that is how your database definition says. But right now your database definition has not identified this particular or has not marked this column as either mandatory or unique. That's why you don't see these options. You have employee name, you have location, you have notice period. So this is the way you represent the metadata, right, or the structure of the data which is going to be pushed to the database. Yes.
Yeah. So in the left side, where you have the folders, if you click on the right click on any folder, you can also create a profile from there, right? There is an option to create a profile. So how this is different than that one?
It's not different. These are the two different ways of creating a profile. That's all.
Okay.
So whatever profile we created over here, okay, just give me a minute. Whatever profile we created, DB employees data, you should be able to see that over here also. So if you go to this Dell Boomi April 2021 batch, this is the folder which we are working on, employee integration. So you can see profile is a component. And how can you confirm that? There is a revision history. There is a component ID. Yes. And here, whatever components we have configured so far, right? Whether you go into the process and configure that, or you can always configure the components from here also, that eventually will land into the component explorer. So if you see, you go to the database profiles. Can you see the profile name over here also?
Yeah, but which one is the best practice to do? Either from.
The one which we are doing right now.
Okay.
The one which we are doing right now is a better practice. Because that will automatically make sure that your profiles are getting created in the right folder. Yeah.
Yes, got it.
So now let's say we wanted to read the data, we want to write into the database. So I'm reorganizing this. Do you think we are all done? We are all set. We read the data which is in the XML format. We want to write the data which has to be in the database format. Are we all set, or is there some piece which is missing?
Conversion of data.
Data conversion is.
Yes. So the transformation of the data, right? Conversion of the data from one format to another is missing, which is a very, very important piece. And that's why we are doing this whole story, right? We got the data in which format? XML format. We want to send the data which has to be in the database format. So in between, some transformation has to happen, right? In between component number this and component number this, there has to be some kind of transformation which has to happen, right? So now we will go to the shapes. Do you find any component which you feel can help us to do transformations?
Map.
Map. So if I type transformation, I don't find anything. So in Boomi world, map shape helps us to do the transformation of data from one format to another. Now in this case, what are the two different formats we have?
XML and database.
Very nice. We have XML format which needs to be converted into database format, right? So source is database or source is XML?
Source is XML.
Source is XML, right?
Yes.
Source is XML and the target is
Database.
database. Do we have the representation of the database format already with us?
Yes.
Representation as in, do we have the, because see, when you do the transformation, you cannot do the transformation of the data directly, right? Because data is produced at the runtime. Now when you're doing the development, do you have the data? Do you know what all data you will get? You do not know that, right? You might know only the structure of the data, and using that structure only you will do the transformations, right? So for the database format, or do you have the representation for the data which can be accepted by the database? Do you have the database profile ready with you?
Yes.
Yes. So we will go here and we will click on plus. Now understand this. This is a little confusing. We started with a map shape, isn't it? Which shape are we starting with? Map shape. Now map shape internally references a component. You double click on this. I can say map shape. Let's say something like employees XML to database transformation, something like this. I'll hit OK. Now it is still giving me some kind of warning, right? Means some configuration is missing.
So the map shape should have a reference.
So map shape should have a reference to a
Map.
component, and that component is a map component. So if you see here, it is asking you for some reference, right? One option is you can search for something. When you're trying to search, where is it pointing you to? It is saying search components, and these is routing you to the component explorer, but we haven't created any component so far, so we'll click on plus. And typically you write like this, map. Okay, you can give the name whatever you want. So now this is very important part. So first of all, is it a component or not? How can you identify? There is a component ID, created by, created date, and all that stuff. Yes or no?
So is this a map component?
Yes.
I mean, in the last class you said map is a shape, right?
That's what I'm saying. Map is a shape. Now this is a little confusing. So even now I'm saying so. Okay. Can you see under shapes, map is a shape? Yes. Now, if you go here, let's say new. Now, where are we? We are trying to create the components, and under the types, can you see map? So what I'm trying to say is there is a component with the name map. There is a component with the, or there is a shape with the name map. When you configure, so you cannot use map component directly. It is always used with the help of a shape. The name of the shape is also map shape. So map shape internally references a map component.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a little confusing, but you have to understand what I told was not wrong. You can see the heading over here, map shape uses maps. Now it use maps. This shape use maps, and what map it is talking about? The map component, right? To transform data from one format to another. I will click on the pencil button. I will land over here. So right now
So
the screen, yeah,
so same means like DB, like other one. Map also needs like a schema, like a profile, so that we are doing this. You see, it also need a schema kind of thing to map whatever the input has coming, right? The similar way we are trying to achieve.
absolutely correct. That's correct. So now see, when you want to do the mappings, whichever tool you work on, right? Whether you work on Oracle related tools, Dell Boomi, the fundamental remains same. It doesn't change anywhere. Okay. The only thing which might change is the jargons or the keywords which we use to represent them. The methodology might change, but the methodology will also change slightly based on the language which is internally used to build that tool, but the fundamental remains same. So what I'm trying to say is we have source, we have target, and in between we can do some kind of manipulations with the data or transformations with the data. Now you tell me what should be the database format. It is asking me choose the destination profile for your map, choose the source profile, means choose the representation of the data which is going to come from the source, choose the representation of the data which is required to be sent to the target. So what do you suggest? What do you think? What should be chosen over here?
DB profile.
DB profile.
We created a profile, guys, sometime back for database. Did we create a profile? I mean, it automatically got created, but we helped with the configurations, right? And what is the name of this profile? DB employees data. So this profile represents the data which will be accepted by the database. Go to choose. Here there is database. So there are 5 types of profiles. That's what I told. Yes or no? I'll repeat. Here there is an option called as choose. And when I go to the profile type, there is a drop down which helps you to first of all select which type of profile are you looking for. Okay, a lot of people, what they will do is they will be on XML and they will start looking for the DB profile and they will ping me that I cannot see my profile. Okay, and this is a common mistake. Even I used to make similar mistakes at some point of time. So just make sure you are selecting the right option. Then this is there. We go to the folder where we are working on and we select the profile. And here there is an option to expand everything. Very nice. So we can see the representation. What about the source? Have we created any profile for the XML data so far?
No.
Have we created any representation of the XML data?
No.
So what kind of profile should I create for that?
XML profile.
So I'll go to choose. It is asking me profile type. I know I don't have a profile. So I will go to the XML section and I'll say what? Create new profile. I'll give the name as XML employees data. I'll save. So there are a couple of options. You can create the profile manually or you have an option to import. And when you want to import, you can create the profile with the help of a sample XML file. You can create it with the help of a schema or Rosetta Net. So right now I will use XML file to create the profile, but ideally XML schema is the best thing to be used to create the profiles. Okay, now you go here and you select the file. Right, when I select the file, I get here into the D. Where do I have the sample profile? Or sorry, sample file. I have the sample file over here. I select that, and using that sample file, I'm trying to create a profile. Can you see a profile automatically got created? Root element, within that child element, again another child element. In that child element also there are some subchilds. Everything automatically got created. I will hit save button. Can you see there is a revision history? Yes. Is profile a component or a shape?
It's a component.
Profile is a component.
Component.
Profile is a component, right? I hope we all understand this. Yeah, profile is a component. So I'll just hit save and close. Now can you see there is something towards source side, there is something towards target side. Now what we have to do? We have to do mapping. So we have to select the field from the source and we have to pass to the target. It's very easy. You have to drag and drop the wire. Okay, let me remove it. You have to drag a wire. I feel the employee ID should be mapped to EMP ID. I'll drag and drop a wire. Let me just hit save and close for the time being, and I can come back to my map once again. You can just expand this and you can see employee ID from the source is getting mapped to the employee ID in the target. Now for the name, let's say I want to concatenate these two things and then I want to pass. Yeah, I want to concatenate and then I want to pass. Because if let's say I do this, okay, can I do like this? It will not allow me, because I cannot have two mappings from the source to the single field in the target. See, if I'm trying to do like this, it is not allowing me. This is a common rule, right? You cannot map two fields from the source to one target. That's not possible. But I don't want to pass first name, but what I want to pass is a concatenation of the first name and the last name, isn't it? That's what makes sense. So I'll go to functions. So there are a lot of functions which you can define under user defined, and there are a lot of functions which are readily available. So there are different categories of that: string related functions, numeric related functions, date, and all that blah blah stuff. Now in this case, what do you think? Which type of functions should we need, or do we need?
String.
String related, right? Because we are playing around with
Yes.
string, and under string also we have so many options. Do you find any function over here which is matching to our need?
Concat.
String
Very
concat.
nice. I will click on OK. Now it is asking me some delimiter. Delimiter means is kind of a separator. So when we are trying to concat two things, do we want to straight away go and concat, or in between we want to have some kind of a separator or a delimiter? Now in
Yeah.
between first name and the last name, what is the delimiter you will prefer?
Space.
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 Very nice. So I will add a space. If you want to fix to length, should we fix to length? It
No.
depends. It depends. Ideally, no. But if you feel that in my database I have some constraint, okay, let's. In your database, is there any constraint on the employee name?
Yeah, it's there till 100 length it can go.
Yes.
So what I will say fix to length 100. Okay. This is not a mandatory thing to pass. This delimiter and these are not mandatory. So now I go for input. I will give input name is, you can give whatever you want. Let's say input 1. Okay. Or if you feel this input 1 is little confusing, you can name it like this also. First name. You can give whatever name you want. You can give one more last name. Add. Hit OK. Okay, and hit OK. That's all. So you configured a function. So far we haven't written a single line of code. Yeah. So you configured a concat function. This concat function is capable of concatenating two strings with space as a delimiter, and the maximum length would be 100. So whatever first name I'm getting from the source, I will pass over here. Whatever last name I'm getting this from the source, I will pass over here. It will internally do all the calculations, and the resultant will be assigned to this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. I did the concatenation and I'm passing to the employee. And let's say location I'm passing as is. What about notice period? Notice period logic is dependent on whom? On location, right? That's what we decided. For now, we will just park it. Right now, we will not touch notice period. Maybe we'll take that in next session. So we did the mapping. We save and close everything. Save. Now, sometimes what happens is the structure might look something like this. Okay, right now the number of shapes and components are limited. Sometimes, let's say it is like this. You don't understand anything. There is a button called as arrange button. That arrange button will arrange everything for you. Yes, there is a button, arrange button, which will arrange everything for you. So we have a start shape of no data type. We have a try catch to do the error handling. We have a disconnector, which is trying to read the file. We have a map shape, which references a map component, and that is capable of doing the transformations from the XML format to the database format. Then we have a database connector, which is capable of connecting with the database and inserting the data into the database. Any questions so far? Anyone who is not following any of the stuff which has been explained so far? Sai, Manikanta, Somashekhar, guys, are you following?
So
Yes, sir,
what
I'm
would
All,
be something in the
all.
source and if you don't have the same field in the target?
Come again?
So what if we have something in the source, let's say the first name, first and last name, and in the
Mhm.
target if we don't have the name field, so what we have to
You
do?
can leave it. It is not mandatory that you have to map everything. Okay. So for example, let's say here we have location, here also we have location. If we don't have location over here, don't map it. That's fine. It's not mandatory that whatever is coming from the source will go to the target, right? Sometimes it might happen you get hundreds of the fields from the source, but the target might need only 10 out of those. So we will map only 10. We will leave remaining.
Okay.
Okay. It's not mandatory that we have to pass everything.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll quickly go ahead and run a test. So for running the test, we'll select the atom.
One doubt, when we were connecting to Oracle DB, right? That time
Mhm.
atom came into picture, means direct correlation. Why with the atom came with Oracle? We were choosing the atom, right? So why suddenly into that picture, means connecting to database? Why atom came into picture?
because
It's a
it is your runtime.
yeah, it's a runtime entity, but at runtime automatically doesn't connect to, means atom directly doesn't connect to Oracle. We need to choose atom beginning itself. Correct? That's why it's like.
I didn't get your question.
So now
Come
you
again.
ran, right? Now
Yes,
you ran this process, right? It went into the green portion of Oracle DB, right?
correct.
At that time atom could have connect, means automatic, means it's not like automatic it will connect Oracle DB with that shape to the, means because it has already that connected source, right? It could have not connected directly. It has to be previously itself has to be connected to that atom. Is it like that?
No, no, no. So at that time, we just connected to pull that metadata. That's all. So when I was
Okay.
configuring the operation at that time, I used some connect atom, right? That was done so that I could pull the metadata from the database. But right now,
So
when I'm executing, the atom which will be used for the execution is the one which you select while running the test. Whatever you did that configuration, that was just to pull the data from the data. I mean, that was just to pull the metadata from the database.
so in future also, if any connector wants, means any connector has to be associated with this process. Initially itself atom has to connect with itself, then only all this any configuration, for example it was like Oracle DBA, tomorrow it is going FTP, that atom has to communicate first to that one and then only those things can be pulled up, right?
Yes, to pull that information, see everywhere we might not need to pull the metadata. So if you're good enough, you can define that metadata yourself also. Boomi always gives you an option. But let's say in the database table, there are hundreds of fields, right? So if you start defining it manually, it will become very time consuming for you. So Boomi gave you an option. You go and pull the metadata directly from the database. So if you anytime want to do that, then you're right. You have to use the atom, go and get the metadata. But let's say you are capable enough to generate the metadata yourself, then that step is not mandatory. You can create it manually also, and you can run the test with the atom.
Okay, understood.
So you see everything turns green, but why don't we see anything on the stop shape? Because insert operation does not return any document, and if a document is not returned, the shape does not get executed. Yes or no? So let's see what happened. We started with a star shape of no data type. The control came to the try catch shape. What should be the source data to the try catch shape?
Nothing.
Empty document. Yes,
Yeah.
empty document. What should be the input to the disk? Again, empty document. What should be the input to the map component?
Employee
XML profile.
disk data.
The data which we
XML
pulled from
profile,
the
yeah.
disk, right?
Yeah.
Or I can say the XML data, right?
XML data. Yeah.
Yes, so let's go and click. Do we see some data is there? And if I want to look at that data, do we see the XML data? Right?
Yeah.
Then we do some transformations. So if you click here, you go to the logs, you will see the transformation logs. Okay, so you see you got some input, first name Sumit, last name Agarwal. It is doing concatenation, and the result is Sumit Agarwal, right? So you can see the logs here, and these kind of logs are called as which type of logs? The logs which you see at the bottom after clicking on individual shapes.
Logs.
Hmm. Okay, it will be called as shape logs, shape level logs, right? These are all as shape level logs. So if I want to see the logs for this shape, I can click here. If I want to click on this shape and see the logs and all that stuff, right? Then what should be the input to this component or the shape?
The XML
Output.
data. What are the things that we mapped?
Okay,
Whatever mapping is done, so that
absolutely. The resultant of that, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to shape source data, we will see the input which is going to this, and or else we can say the resultant of the transformation. So this is how the database representation looks like. DB start, right? Then there is some kind of unique key. Then here is your data. Can you see here your data is there? ID, name, location, isn't it?
Yes.
This is going to the database. And now one thing which we can quickly check is we can go and see whether the data really got pushed to the database or not. Yes. Can you see the data? 101. Sumit Agarwal, the concatenation worked absolutely fine. And the location. Yes.
Yeah.
So that means we have been able to achieve one small integration where we are pulling the data from the file and we are able to push it to the database.
So if there is no use with stop sign at the
Actually,
last.
in this case, yes. In this case, yes, there is no use, right? And this brings me to the next question for you. Let's say after inserting the data into the database, you were also required to archive the file in some other location, because after database the control is not moving ahead. So if let's say you had a requirement that if the data is successfully pushed to the target system, you want to archive the source file. How will you archive the file? If the flow itself is not moving ahead, how will you archive the file? And that's a very common requirement. So we will see how is it possible to achieve that in Boomi in the next session. But any questions guys so far?
No, Sumit.
All right.
Can you share that yesterday and today's this video?
Veer, I think I shared yesterday's video. Didn't you receive it?
I didn't receive for session 4 or 5. Actually, I received for 6.
Who all have not received? Can you just leave your email
Me.
IDs in the chat window quickly?
Yeah. So, Sumit, I haven't got any video recording up till now.
Yeah, I know. Can you just leave your email ID once? And I'm sorry, I will keep on asking email IDs again and again. I'm
Okay.
I have pinged.